Thanks for being on the show today, Nick.
All good. It's good to have a chat.
Yeah. Now, you've been around bees your whole life. You've had bees on your grandparents' farm, and you've been doing it pretty much ever since. What's that been like?
It's been good. It's I initially wasn't a big fan of bees. I would go down to my grandparents. Invariably, their equipment and protective gear wasn't really that great, and I would get stung to pieces. And as a young teenager, that's not the best way to spend your weekends, and definitely not the best way to spend your summer holidays. I much preferred the farming part rather than the beekeeping part, to be honest.
I think our grandparents were just a bit tougher than us, Like
Yeah, it could be that too.
my grandfather, he was a bit of an amateur beekeeper, and he didn't wear protective gear at all. He just put fishing net around his akubra.
Yep.
And
Yep.
he had a 44-gallon drum, and he'd sort of get a bit of a fire going, put a few pine needles in, get a bit of smoke, let it waft over a wild hive,
Yep.
and then he would get the comb out, and just the bees would go nuts, and he didn't even care.
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot in that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Probably I was a bit of a city boy at that point, so going out to the farm, riding around on quad bikes, and chasing around the countryside was a bit more fun than getting stung by nasty little insects.
Yeah.
And then my grandparents started exporting honeydew over to the UK, and as a result of that, Dad got interested in bees, and he had a couple of shots at sort of hobby beekeeping, and then decided to go commercial. And I was helping largely in school holidays, university holidays, just helping him to get through the work, and still not really enjoying it that much until I went to Canada the first time and decided actually there was a lot more to the industry than I thought. And rather than going back to the UK where I'd been working in hotel management, I came back to New Zealand and started working with him, and that kind of went from there.
Whereabouts in Canada was it?
First time round was a little place called, it was just out of Lamont, which is just out of Fort Saskatchewan, which is just out of Edmonton. So about 2 hours out of Edmonton.
Yeah, that's canola country, isn't it?
Yep, 100%. Yep. So that was all honey. That operation was all honey, owned by an Australian actually living over there, who'd been living there for a long time, who employed Kiwis and Aussies for the season.
Yep. Oh, that's good.
So that was great, and that showed me kind of what a commercial operation really looked like, rather than this pretty small scale one we were running in New Zealand at the time. And so instead of going, as I say, back to the UK, I came back and went into partnership with Dad and started beekeeping full time and started taking it seriously. So, and then around about 15 years ago, my then wife was from Nelson, and she wanted to come home to have kids, and so we kind of finished that partnership with my father and moved down here and set up down here where we are now. So
yeah, that's
been
nice.
24 years now. So yeah.
I've heard that story a few times, that people grow up with bees and they're not too keen when they're a kid, and then they go out and do some other jobs and say, oh, maybe beekeeping was actually pretty good. And they come back to their family business. And and you do quite a bit of beekeeping with your kids. So what do you think the trick is to getting your kids interested?
Yeah, I think good protective gear is a good start, I think, for kids. Getting stung is the least favorite part of the job for them.
Yes.
Definitely with my daughter and my stepdaughter, what we try and do is kind of target the more fun jobs for them. And that's actually not always the ones you think will be the more fun jobs. So for Rosa, my daughter particularly, she likes spotting queens, caging queens.
Yes.
Partly that's potentially because we've got quite a good group of staff who are good fun, who engage with her and make it a bit more enjoyable. And also just general sorting out equipment, things like that, because we pay her as well. So that obviously helps a little bit now that she's getting a bit older. So yeah, really for us, it's about being a little bit targeted and not pushing them into coming out with us for a big 12-hour day, but saying, well, come out for 3 to 4 hours in the morning and then you can go and see your friends in the afternoon.
No midnight runs with the bees in the middle of summer?
No. I mean, I used to love that because I used to get
Yeah.
paid to sit in the truck and drive around the
Yes.
countryside. That's fantastic. But
Yeah.
so yeah, and just not pushing it, I think. Yeah, that's the big thing for us. You would have seen the photo on my website probably, and that's Rosa when she's quite little. She's actually 12 now, so she's a bit bigger than that.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, she's got other things that she's interested in, but yeah, she likes it. I think a lot of beekeepers that I deal with, a lot of their identity is around being a beekeeper as well, and so the girls, I think, take quite a lot of pride out of us being beekeepers. We're a little bit different in terms of their friends and their friends' parents. And Erin, my partner, works with me as well. So it's a whole family deal now.
Oh, that's always nice. So where did you
Yeah.
guys get into queen rearing?
So when I was working with my father in the North Island, we had the guy we bought the small business off. This was after I'd come back from Canada. He had a lead on another person who was running a queen breeding operation quite nearby. And unfortunately, the beekeeper died suddenly, and his wife was trying to get through the rest of the season and look to sell it because she was quite allergic and not interested in the bees. And so we took that on. And as part of buying that business, we also inherited one of the workers called Sam, who was their queen breeder. And he kind of taught us what he knew, which was 40, 50 years of experience beekeeping, which was fantastic. And then that became part of what we did there, which was hives into kiwi fruit pollination, honey, and the queens, mostly going to Canada through another company. And then when I came down to Nelson, it just kind of made sense to go into queens. It's a bit more manageable, a bit gentler on your body too. At that stage, we had a young child, so running hives around the countryside chasing honey. At that stage, Manuka honey, which was where the money was, wasn't quite so appealing. And so the queens is where we went, and really just built the business off that. And it's been really enjoyable. It's challenging at times. It's definitely challenging across the season at times, but yeah, really enjoyable. I think some of the things that you have to bring to queen breeding are quite different to what you bring to just general beekeeping, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you've got a nice quote that I read. I think it was on your website. You said, most breeders work hard to get their queen bees to conform to either Italian or Carniolan color traits. Largely, this is an aesthetic consideration, as most beekeepers are more interested in performance and traits. Interesting quote. Yeah. Do you want to sort of unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, well, that's really a New Zealand related quote because we obviously can't bring any semen or other genetics into the country. So we're largely limited by Italian and Carniolan lines. So because the vast majority of queens in New Zealand are open mated and there's a lot of bees in the country for a small country, the traits that you see along Italian lines, which is what we breed, it's not a clean, perfect Italian because you're not able to bring in other genetics. So you're working with open mated and areas where you have some overlap with other beekeepers. So you try and manage the things you can manage. So in our situation, we heavily manage what we graft from our breeders, which we supply internally. We don't buy them in. We manage our drone supply and volumes in the areas that we're mating as well, for the same reason, so that we can control as much as we can control. But in the end, as has always been the case in New Zealand, really, people are more interested in how much honey they're going to get than anything else. And there's definitely been a variation in our industry with the Manuka boom, which was, to be honest, pretty crazy for a while there. And that's the heat's definitely come out of that, and we're going back to more of what it was like before. And so people are getting more interested in the quality of what you've got rather than just whether you've got it, which when Manuka was super hot, that was just if you had a queen, they didn't ask what kind it was, they didn't ask how much it was often, they just asked if they could get it. So been quite interesting to see that. But I think, yeah, the beekeepers that are still doing it and committed to the industry are more and more interested in what you're doing and what it means for them.
Mm-hmm. So you're
Yes.
you're looking at the honey production mainly, and the color, other things don't really come into it much for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, we breed, as I say, and I say in that quote, we breed long Italian lines. So golden queens is what we're looking for, big golden queens. But then most of the traits that we look at within that are around hygiene, production, how they cluster down over winter, early spring build up, because a lot of sites have a lot of places in New Zealand are still chasing Manuka honey, which in some cases can be quite early in the season.
Yep.
And also now it's more and more important for people. A lot of our clients around pollination is becoming a bigger thing again. So they also want relatively early build up so that they've got good strong hives they can either split or put into pollination. So yeah.
So let's say you've got a bee, a potential breeder, building up early, nice big early brood patterns, good track record for honey production, but she's a little dark. Is that one a dud?
No, we'll sell queens that have got a slight black tip at times, and that's really a judgment on what they look like in the hive and what their progeny looks like as well. We won't, every now and again, by nature of the open mating, you do get what we call a striper, so something that's a bit blacker. Those we don't sell, not because they're not good queens, but because that's not what we're selling. It's part of how we put ourselves out into the market, is this is what we do and we do it well and we're consistent on what we do. So those ones, well, they won't go back into our operation because we don't want to start bringing any of that sort of genetic in. So those ones are culled.
Okay.
So the color is important to us. That's a kind of I guess it's a presentation thing and a personal pride thing. But yeah. So we will sell something with a black tip or a slight black stripe, but our staff are pretty well versed in what's acceptable and what's not. And if they're not sure, they just ask me, because often most of the time caging. So
yeah, that's really interesting. Now you've got a system that you call the 400 minimum hive pyramid pattern for queen rearing. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
I don't actually know that I had that name tagged to it, but that's a blooming good name for it, to be honest.
Really?
So I'll take that. I'm going to get you to write that down and email that to me.
Oh, must have.
I think
maybe someone wrote it on your behalf.
yeah, probably. I think what you're talking about is the belief that I have that you can't actually run a successful queen breeding operation without 400 hives as a minimum.
Yes.
Just around genetics, right?
Yep.
And we were, and to be honest, I would be surprised if most breeders don't do this instinctively. Our hives work as a pyramid, so you have down the bottom of the pyramid a bunch of field hives that really are out there doing the work. They're hives that you're monitoring constantly, just every time you go in. I mean, every time we open a hive, we're looking at brood because that's what we're interested in. And that's kind of the engine of your hive is your queen, obviously, as you know, as most breeders do. So you kind of got to know what's going on there. But we're also monitoring for disease at the same time, so that's why we're always looking at brood. And then above that, you have your drone hives, which are superior queens that you've picked out of the field. We also bring in genetic diversity through our drones. So we will only graft from our own material, but we'll bring in queens from other breeders, generally breeders, and we'll run them in specific sites marked with a view to monitoring them to see if there's any that have traits that we want to integrate into ours, and then they'll come in as drone hives. So if you have 50, 60 queens from another breeder in 2 yards, for example, out of that there might be a couple that we integrate into our system through drones, through drone hives. Yeah, and then above that we have our
those are mated queens that you're bringing in.
100%. Yeah, we don't buy cells in.
Okay.
So yeah, and then above that we have our queen breeders, and we'll generally have 8 breeders sitting in our grafting yard because we don't close the queens in. We let them free rein, so we graft from them that way. So it's good to have a bit of variety. And then we'll have a number of queens out in the field that we've marked as potential breeders, which also can be used for drone supply, that we can access if something happens to one of the breeders or in our yard, in our graft yard. So the reason I think I was talking about that was, I think certainly when Manuka was big and booming, there were a lot of people who were calling themselves queen breeders and were operating with 20 hives in the backyard and selling queens. And you just can't have a sustainable genetic program with that number of hives, in my opinion. And 400 seems like the size that you've got enough diversity that even if you're not bringing in a lot of genetic diversity from others, you've probably still got some cover. You've got some safety there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's kind of a number that I kind of came to.
Mm-hmm.
Which seemed to make sense.
A question about bringing in mated queens. Is there any particular reason why you don't bring in cells for the same reason?
To be honest, just because it's quicker, and also because what we're trying to do is we're also trying to bring in full diversity. We don't want to bring in a cell that then mates with some of ours.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We want something that's completely different. We don't bring in a lot. We have been speaking to Rea Butler, who I think you've spoken to.
Yeah, Ray's great.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, I've known her for a long time. So we were looking to do some artificial insemination with her on last summer, but we just got too squeezed for time, and she had some other things on. So we're hoping that that's something that we're going to instigate this season, where we will take our virgins down to her cells basically, and she'll emerge them and then artificial inseminate them. Instrumental insemination, she calls it, right?
Yeah.
And then she'll run them into her units and monitor them, and then we'll get them back.
Okay, and she's going to be
monitoring them,
putting them against some VSH drone lines.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So that's just to try and really just to have a bit of a play on it and see. I don't want to set up a artificial insemination set up here. We do what we do really well, and I don't really need to add another layer of complexity. But if we can leverage off the skills she's got, which is vast, she's been doing it a long time, it makes some sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back on that point, talking about swapping mated queens, that's actually a really good. I do the same thing. So I'll share mated queens with some friends of mine,
Yep.
and for the same reason, you give away a few of yours, so it helps them, and then you get a few back, and I do the same thing. I put them in a different yard, not in my drone colony yard, and then you assess them, and then
100%.
Same thing, you bring it in. And so if you've got a good network of other queen breeders that you're friends with, it's really, really good for that.
For
and
sure.
That's, having that collaboration is the best thing that you can have as a queen breeder.
Well, for sure. And you also don't want to be so egotistical to think you're the only person with all the answers, because it's not the way.
Yeah, and you can't. I don't think you can do it by yourself, to be honest. I think you do need friends. Maybe if you've come from a big generational beekeeping family and you've got a lot of hives and a lot of genetic diversity, and I do know some people that haven't brought anything in for like 50 years and they do a great job. The Horners here in Australia, for example, they haven't brought anything in for a long time, and they do probably the best queens in Australia. But generally speaking, I think that you need to have friends to be able to swap your genetics and sort of prop yourselves up like that. So that's a great way of doing it. Now, tell us, you're offering mated queens, you're offering virgins and cells for sale. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does it work with people?
Yeah.
Sorry?
And nucleosides as well.
Oh, and nukes as well. Okay, excellent. Yep. So how does it work with so you're doing the mated queens by mail, and how does it work with the cells?
Cells are all local. So we either some clients we deliver to, we just drop them in if they're relatively close and they're within our runs. Otherwise, people will just come and pick them up from the graft yard, which is at home. So that's pretty easy. We don't ship them. I know there's at least one breeder in the North Island who does ship cells around. I just am a bit cautious about that because I just worry that the quality gets damaged. That said, we do send some in carousel incubators over to Golden Bay, which is probably a 2-hour drive from us over a pretty big hill for some clients. But that's because we can then, the courier goes over in the morning and brings the incubator back in the afternoon, so we don't have to package it as such. So
yeah, that's a nice thing to do.
yeah, so if I could increase and stretch the network around that side of things, I would. I've got spare incubators that we can plug into cigarette lighters and send them around. I would do that, but in terms of mailing them, I wouldn't feel so comfortable. It just, when you're a relatively small breeder and everything, reputation is everything, and with our clients through the quality of what we provide and the service we provide, I'd hate to undermine that by people saying, "Oh, half these cells were rubbish," and that would just
Yeah, absolutely.
just for how we try and run our operation, really.
Yeah. And I might put in the show notes for listeners here, there's some good research about sending queen cells. I haven't personally tried it. Well, I have tried. I've experimented with it, but I haven't done it commercially. And my view is that Australian postal system, it's just not as good as the American postal system, which is where this research comes from. Yeah, and I imagine Australia and New Zealand are pretty similar. It'd be about the same, I imagine. It's just not as reliable as the American system. So therefore, I sort of did a few tests, and I wasn't that happy with the results. So therefore, I haven't really gone further down. But for those people who want to give it a try, I know there's a lot of listeners that aren't in Australia and New Zealand who listen to this podcast. So I'm going to put that research up for you so you can learn a little bit more about sending queen cells. All right, Nick. So people buying queens, they can do the mated queens, they do the cells, the nukes. Is there anything else that you offer in your business?
Hives as well. We do sell hives.
Excellent.
I find that market and the nuke market has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years as well, as has the price for them.
Yep.
I don't know how much your listeners or you know about what's going on in the New Zealand industry at the moment, but it's pretty tough out there. And
it's interesting you should say that. I've actually got John Berry coming on the podcast soon to talk a little bit about that.
No, he'll be able to tell you. Yeah.
He's got, I was talking to him yesterday and he was telling me it's been through a real kind of, roller coaster over the last 10 years.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. No, amazing. You got to a million hives at one point. A million hives in New Zealand at one point, and it's backed off a bit in the last few years. Very interesting. You've got a business. You've just bought a business in the last couple of years called Backyard Bees. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of our local clients for queens had a hive rental business that they were running. They were extracting our honey at the time as well because they had a honey extraction plant. And they have built it up from scratch, actually, and they did a really good job too. So within the Nelson Tasman region, they had 300 hives placed on properties, mostly residential, but some rural as well. Generally one, maybe 2 hives, with a few exceptions. And it was a hive rental business. The client is charged what is now, because we put the price up slightly, $345 plus GST for a hive, and we give them 10 kgs of honey back at the end of the season, and we manage it for them. So the numbers on it, it's hard because we've got when we bought that, one of their beekeepers, Hamish, came across to us, and he's been fantastic and is great across all aspects of our business. It's hard in that it's quite a lot of client management, and the clients there are fantastic. They're so enthusiastic about having bees there, so excited to talk to you, so interested in what we're doing.
It's just a lot of people, right?
A lot of people, and
great,
it's a lot of
great people, but a lot of people.
100%, yep. So, but really, really good to deal with, and really enjoyable. So Erin, my partner, does a lot of the behind the scene admin managing of that, and she's incredible. She's really got it dialed in, and Hamish does quite a lot of the beekeeping. But the above the hive rental aspect to it, the appeal for us is that in terms of hive management, we need to manage the strength of them down early in the season, or we have swarming issues. And so we can effectively farm brood off them, which we can use in our breeding operation as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good.
And also with respect to swarm control as well, we dequeen them in spring and requeen with cells in spring. And those queens have been carried just over the winter. And so they form part of our overwintered queen supply.
Yeah, excellent. And you don't have to, have space in a mating nuke. That's fantastic.
No,
you can
right.
requeen them without using a mating nuke. That's really good.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, if you were just running it for honey and just running it for the hive rental side of things, it would be a part-time job for a start. And if you were running it as a full-time job, you wouldn't be working very hard for a start. But it kind of makes sense on some level, but doesn't make sense as a whole business. It's not a full-time job running 300 hives in that way.
So it synergizes well with your business.
Definitely, yeah. So I mean, we pulled, I think, off the 300 hives, sort of 700 frames of brood last year that can go into breeding units. So that's a big benefit to us.
Yeah, and I imagine the mating nukes are the same size frames.
Yeah. Everything's full depth for us. Full depth 2 ways is what we run. Yep. So that was the real appeal for us, because we definitely had people going, "Well, why'd you buy that?" But actually, when you explain it to them and explain how
it's the synergy. Yeah, that 100%. Makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Yeah, especially for a queen breeder.
Yes, definitely. Access to brood that we know has been managed by good staff, because it's our guys, and it's clean of disease, is just massive for us. So, and it allows us to run less field hives in the queen breeding part of the business as well. So,
sounds good. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show today, Nick. How can people find you if they want to buy a queen or rent a hive off you?
Well, if they're looking for the hive rental side of things, Backyard Bees, just search that in Google, and that you'll find that, no problems. And then Blue Sky Beekeeping is the name of our queen breeding operation. So buyqueens.nz, that'll show up, or Blue Sky Beekeeping, and you'll come to our site, and then just drop us a line.
Excellent. I'll put all that in the show notes, and that's for all of New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah, happy to send them all around the country. Yep.
No worries. Well, thanks a lot, Nick. Anything else you want to chat about before we wrap it up today?
No, I don't think so. I think you've covered pretty much what we do. It's definitely a challenging time. It sounds like you guys are having a bit of a challenging time over there. So hopefully you're starting to get your head around Varroa and all the other challenges that are coming your way.
That's another reason why I'm chatting to John. I've got a few good Varroa questions for him.
Once you get your head around it, you guys are good Australians, are good beekeepers, so you'll have no problems.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
So.
No worries. All right. Well, all the best with the upcoming season.
Awesome. Cheers. Thanks for the call.